During the height of construction for the PRR operations in Altoona, a town was constructed on the mountain above the Horseshoe Curve to house workers of a recently discovered coal mine in the area. In its early days, the town was an invaluable resource to the steel industry that was growing in Johnstown and Pittsburgh. Sadly, though, the town of Glen White only exists in the old black and white photographs and history books of today, as it fell victim to the railroad's continuing decline.
Glen White's kind of unique because it was a town situated in the middle of the Allegheny Mountains that basically showed up because of the Pennsylvania Railroad's construction of the Horseshoe Curve. In Glen White's early days, there was a man named Brian Kelly. He was one of the first landowners at what was Glen White. He was a laborer for constructing the Horseshoe Curve and even the rail line back to where Glen White would be. The people who built the Horseshoe Curve lived in shacks, so then when the Horseshoe Curve was completed, they found that there was these plentiful coal mines there, so people stuck around. People who worked at Glen White and people surrounding the Horseshoe Curve, there was plenty of laborers around keeping an eye on things and make sure all the operations were going on schedule and swiftly. There was plenty of interactions to make sure that when trains were coming down from Glen White to Horseshoe Curve for exporting coal, that there was an available track and there was steam engines there ready to receive the product. It was a little community of its own. They had a school, a church, a company boarding house, a store, and about 25 company homes that families shared once at a time. So it was about a population of 250 at its highest. And so many people were coming and going that the population changed all the time. So it was a little community of its own that had all the necessities of a typical town today. There were several towns like Glen White across Pennsylvania and even the United States. But for the Pennsylvania Railroad to construct the new Horseshoe Curve in the 1850s, that brought an industrial town of Glen White, Pennsylvania to life. And it was a coal mining and coke oven town. Towns like that all across the state were set up shop where product was found. So coal, iron ore, and lumber. They had those products, but having the Pennsylvania Railroad accessible to these points made their success much better. So Glen White got its start as a lumber business and coal mining business. Their product was used everywhere, from the steel mills to even in people's homes. The coal was used to heat their furnaces. And then when the lumber started to fade back in the 1870s, that's when the coke ovens came in. It became a coke oven town in the 1880s when the steel industries in Pittsburgh and Johnstown began to rise up. The coke from the coke ovens was used in those steel mills. And what coke was, it was a product of coal being burned to a certain degree and then coaled. It was a product that would burn thousands of degrees hotter than coal ever would, so it was a necessity for the steelmaking process. Glen White disappeared off the map in the early 1940s, largely because of economic struggles all around. For the company and even the Pennsylvania Railroad was beginning to have some struggles of its own as it was trying to develop more steam engines when other railroads surrounding were focusing on diesel. So as we see this shift in the revolution of railroads, work wasn't as easy as it once was when Glen White was a booming town. You didn't have much coal to be sold, and the number of customers was slowly shrinking. Glen White disappeared in approximately 1941, 1942, when the company went into a voluntary receivership. It tried to get started back up again, but ultimately it was sold at sheriff's sale to M. Glosser Brothers for scrap, and then eventually sold to the city water department. The reason it amazed me so much is that there were families living in an industrial town like Glen White that had all the memories that we have with our families. They had those for themselves, and to think that just a day in the neighborhood at home now, that neighborhood atmosphere was available at Glen White, and now you look at it and being gone for 85 years, you wouldn't even know that today. So reviving that history was really important because there are several people around the city of Altoona and Glitzen and such that have connections to this town, and reviving this history is important because these are how our ancestors made their living, and it all wouldn't have been possible without the Pennsylvania Railroad. So this little tidbit of history is really important because the labor that took place at Glen White helped build the United States, essentially.